Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. The American President Donald Trump just made a very important announcement saying that in one day, in today or tomorrow, there will be an announcement about a deal being reached inside of the Gaza Strip. In the meantime, there are talks that Hamas, who's leading the negotiations between the Americans and the Palestinian side, the Israeli side, and the other mediators too, they said that they went to speak with the Palestinian factions to discuss the details and the latest proposal that was given to them by Steve Witkoff. And this also indicates that there is a very significant progress in terms of the ceasefire. Usually, the Palestinian negotiators wouldn't go to all of the other Palestinian factions unless they're going for an approval. Now, from an official perspective, from the statements that came from the leadership of Hamas, who are dealing with the negotiations, they said that this is purely a consultation. This is to make sure that we're all on the same side. And this agreement is being accepted by all of the Palestinian movements inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, with the declaration of Donald Trump, with the proposal of Witkoff, with Israel reportedly accepting this ceasefire, what is this all going to mean? We're going to go into all of the details. Is this going to be a long-term ceasefire, or is Benjamin Netanyahu going to do the same trick over and over again? But before all of that, let's go and listen to what Donald Trump had to say earlier on when he was asked about the prospect of a ceasefire inside of the Gaza Strip.
Well, they're very close to an agreement on Gaza, and we'll let you know about it during the day or maybe tomorrow. And we have a chance of that. I think we have a chance of making a deal with Iran also. They don't want to be blown up. They would rather make a deal. And I think that could happen in the not too distant future. That would be a great thing if we could have a deal without bombs being dropped all over the Middle East. That would be a very good thing. They can't have a nuclear weapon. We want them to be safe.
So Donald Trump is clearly saying that today or tomorrow there will be an announcement about a ceasefire taking place inside of the Gaza Strip. What kind of ceasefire are we talking about, and how is it related to the document that we spoke about yesterday that was saying everything to do with this framework to reach a deal inside of the Gaza Strip? We'll talk about the proposal of Stephen Witkoff that had multiple back and forth. There were lots of amendments being made to this proposal. There were reports that Hamas already accepted the ceasefire several days back. However, clearly, when that proposal draft went to Israel, it came back with certain amendments. Then Israel said that it agreed on this draft. Now, with this Hamas move going to consult the Palestinian factions to discuss the updated proposal that most likely was the one we spoke about yesterday, this indicates that we are reaching the finalization of this temporary ceasefire deal. What's going to happen? This is one of the main questions here. What is going to happen with this deal? Are we talking about a complete ceasefire that will lead to the end of the war, or is this another stunt by Benjamin Netanyahu? Well, the deal that Steve Witkoff came with does not confirm that there will be an outright end of the war. There are certain things that the Palestinian movements are negotiating in between them on whether they accept them temporarily or move on to reject them and say that, no, we need certain guarantees to end the war. Now, the fact of the matter is, Benjamin Netanyahu, the agreement that I went on previously, stated clearly that there needs to be negotiations followed up by after the first phase of the ceasefire, when it finishes, and during that actual ceasefire being implemented. However, he then went on to break the ceasefire just like Israel did previously. So the ceasefire that we're talking about isn't something that will confirm that the war will completely end. Benjamin Netanyahu would still be able to come up at some point and break the whole ceasefire. What does that mean for the Palestinian side, and what does that mean for the Israeli side? Well, of course, it proves time after time that Israel is the problem. Not Israel just with the genocide in Gaza, Israel as an apartheid, supremacist, neo-fascist entity, brutalizing people and occupying them, and declaring outright that it wants to grab lands inside of the Gaza Strip now with the Israeli defense minister saying that we're going to resettle inside of the Gaza Strip. That's the problem. So before and after the 7th of October, that is the main problem. Now, saying that this ceasefire wouldn't necessarily confirm that the war will end isn't something that's necessarily bad. Why? Well, because the people of Gaza, number one, are our main priority and are the priority of everyone who is following the cause and following what's happening inside of the Gaza Strip is for the people of Gaza to get the relief that they need. And guess what? Even if there is no guarantee that the war is going to completely end 2 months from now, the people need some time. The people need to have a relief. The people need to have an end to the violence, ongoing bombardment and genocide, and they need to have some aid in. That is not ideal. That is not the ideal solution. And there needs to be action being taken so that once and for all of this genocide can stop and Israel and its leaders can be punished for what they're doing and dismantling this apartheid supremacist entity as a whole. However, that ceasefire agreement isn't confirming anything apart from these short-term solutions. What does that mean for Benjamin Netanyahu? Well, it means that Benjamin Netanyahu can go back to the war at some point, not without some repercussions, perhaps, as the Americans are saying we're going to be guarantors, but hey, the American side has been a participant and an enabler of this genocide. As a matter of fact, without the United States and the contributing countries for Israel, there wouldn't have been a genocide, and we're going to get to interesting statements later on in this live stream. But what it means for sure is that Israel also needs a ceasefire. Why? Because, well, they're not doing really well, are they? Now, of course, many will argue that Benjamin Netanyahu has a lot of pressure, and that's true. He has internal pressure and external pressure, and that is indeed true as well. But Benjamin Netanyahu, every time he went and reignited the war and went back in to the war, to the genocide inside of the Gaza Strip, the Israeli terror forces became weaker, whereas the Palestinian resistance remained with the same power and even got stronger and more sophisticated with its actions, as we have been seeing all along and as we have been covering all along. And this tells you that they need this ceasefire militarily too, not just the Palestinian side. So Benjamin Netanyahu needs politically, on a societal level, and militarily. The Palestinians need it at a humanitarian level, at an aid level, political level, military level. They're still fighting Israel day and night. Somehow, I mean, really, most people don't know exactly how it's happening, but it's still happening. That shows you that Benjamin Netanyahu is nowhere near getting to his military objectives in Gaza. Number one, first and foremost, demolishing the Palestinian resistance. That isn't going to happen. Clearly isn't going to happen. And the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu added certain demands for the negotiators is only to make it impossible to reach a deal. And these two conditions are, number one, disarming the Palestinian resistance and sending the leaders of some of the Palestinian resistance movements to exile. Benjamin Netanyahu knew very well that these were impossible conditions that were never going to happen, but he put them there so he can go back to the war. And from the eyes of the Israeli population, Benjamin Netanyahu, if he goes ahead with this deal, and if Hamas and the Palestinian side agree to go ahead with that deal, this will show him as a pragmatic leader who is still an extremist, but also adheres to or listens to the sounds of the people who are calling for him to release some prisoners of war. Although many are not going to be convinced by that. Why? Because, well, previously they told him release all of them all at once. You had that option too, whereas he did not do that. Now, from the Palestinian side, what does that mean? Well, the Palestinians need that very much, and the priority should be the humanitarian efforts for the people of Gaza. Any other sort of analysis or priority should be secondary. Why? Because the people have been going through a genocide, and these people need relief, and no one on earth is entitled to say, oh no, you should not have a ceasefire because no, that's actually not going to really end the war. Well, the people would probably differ in Gaza. The people are calling for a ceasefire. They want this to end, and they also want to live normally. This is the talk that's coming from Gaza. Of course, not at the expense of, well, surrendering to the genocide forces. That's not going to happen. Clearly, Palestine will never surrender, and the Palestinian people will never surrender, let alone Gaza, leading this front against the genocide. That isn't going to happen. Then, from a Palestinian resistance perspective, well, it's going to show that Benjamin Netanyahu is a complete liar. The man has been constantly saying we need to up the pressure and we're not going to stop up until the Palestinian resistance submits. By going into a ceasefire, you're confirming that you're unable to defeat them. You are confirming that you're giving them time. If the argument is, well, Israel's going to have time to recover and whatever it is, well, the Palestinian side is the same thing. So the Palestinian resistance will have that time to recover, reorganize, place itself, position itself, and prepare itself for the next round. That's what's going to happen. And it's going to be clearer for everyone who is still fighting in the Israeli terror army that this is about Benjamin Netanyahu, not about the prisoners of war and not about the Palestinian resistance, because they have been going in being told that this is the final round, this is the final go, we want to eliminate them, we're almost done. And they're being taken down in their dozens day after day in Gaza. This is what we have seen. And from an Israeli perspective, they're punishing the population instead of actually targeting the resistance over the ground, under the ground, monitoring, live implementation, all of that, normal. Whereas the Israeli genocide forces, they are unable to take decisive action that will find an answer to the resistance. They're not going to as well, because these people who are going there, total amateurs, lack of experience, lack of willingness to fight too, let alone the fact that they're fighting for the devil. So it isn't going to work. But Benjamin Netanyahu could potentially still keep some of his core allies inside of the government. Now, there's still risk for Benjamin Netanyahu anyway. Why? Because some people are saying that they will leave the government, especially the Orthodox members of his government, because he's about to pass this new law that will leave no option for the Orthodox community. Is going to put them in a very difficult position. He might see that coming, therefore he's agreeing to a ceasefire agreement now. That could be one of the reasons he's accepting, apart from all of the pressure, all of the talk, the fact that they are being humiliated and that the Palestinian resistance is still there too. Now, will Trump be declaring this agreement? This is something that we spoke about yesterday. There's a very high likelihood that it would be either Donald Trump or Steve Witkoff, because the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian negotiators, they wanted the Americans to have more involvement in this because they're negotiating with them, and they do not, of course, have any sort of trust whatsoever in Israel. Of course, it's not that they have trust in the United States too, but they're talking with them at the end of the day, and they wanted them to confirm that they will force Israel to end this. From a Trump perspective, it looks like he does want to de-escalate things because he's also talking to Iran. Despite all of these talks, we don't want bombs to land, what have you. At the end of the day, he's still talking with them. And at the end of the day, he is applying pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu not to go and carry out an attack against Iran. So we're waiting for this confirmation. Of course, Hamas needs to come with the answer from the negotiations that they had with the Palestinian factions, and potentially they will have notes. So, for example, they might go back to the mediators in the American side too and tell them, look, it's fine with us, but we need more firm or more concrete wording in so-and-so clauses so that we are more certain that you will take concrete measures against Israel once we reach towards the end, or reassure us about the implementation of the steps in the middle, including the cessation of hostilities, lack of any activity from the Israeli army, the withdrawal from certain places, the confirmation of the humanitarian aid, all of the things that the people need. Now it's all about time. If the Palestinian side confirms, well, Donald Trump might have a declaration quite soon. Donald Trump might have a declaration today or tomorrow, and then we might actually see that there is a ceasefire happening, and that is it. However, again, this will not be a permanent ceasefire. This will be a step, and Benjamin Netanyahu would be able to come and breach it again. So far, we're talking about the ceasefire and how the fact that the Palestinian resistance managed to continue throughout all of this time has been a key contributor to Israel taking this decision and having a ceasefire. Now, the Palestinian resistance has published several videos. Every single day, the Palestinian resistance is publishing more and more videos. This time, an IDF group that is basically undercover, formed out of Palestinians, operate for the IDF, criminal gangs who were imprisoned inside of the Gaza Strip and fled prison after Israel carried out strikes on the prisons in Gaza after the 7th of October. They fled prisons, and many of them started to deal with Israel, and many of them are ex-PA forces under the previous Palestinian Authority, the same authority under Abu Mazen. However, we're talking about IDF. At the end of the day, whether it's Palestinian, non-Palestinian, whatever it is, if you operate with the IDF, you are the IDF. That's it. Now, the Palestinian resistance is monitoring them. It knows how they operate. And they actually published a video of them to show the people that they know what they're doing. And in this video, they're stating that the Israeli terror army used some of the musta'ribin, they call them, or the Arabizers, or the people who show themselves to be Arabs. Some of them would be Arabs, some of them are Israeli Jews, for example, who look like Arab and pretend so that they can infiltrate. And they're saying that they use some of these units to go from house to house and try and find tunnels inside of the Gaza Strip and find resistance fighters in multiple parts of the Gaza Strip. And both of them had joint operations together. The Israeli terror forces gave them multiple tasks. Some of them included planting explosive devices in some homes. And that these people go in armored vehicles, travel in armored vehicles alongside the Israeli army, where the Israeli army is present. So they published this video, and this video was in Rafah, that's again South Gaza, an area that Israel considers to be a part of the Murag area, where they have a very several kilometers of space which Israel considers to be a buffer zone. And here they're showing them clearly, that's the Palestinian resistance recording them, these IDF agents in Gaza, operating and on behalf of the Israeli terror army, looking for certain houses, trying to find the Palestinian resistance fighters or tunnels to protect the Israeli terror forces in Gaza. And these people have also been stealing some of the aid and wreaking havoc. As a matter of fact, the United Nations said that some of them came armed men and stole medical equipment and medication and also food that was supposed to treat malnourished people in hospitals. Israel does that deliberately, and these people were there with the knowledge of the American mercenaries, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, by the way, because they wanted this chaos. However, despite all of that, and despite the challenging environment, and despite the bombardment and destruction and genocide, the Palestinian resistance is still present in the areas that are most hit and destroyed. One of them is Rafah, and they're recording them. They're showing exactly where they're moving, and they are able to carry out live operations against them inside of the Gaza Strip. And as they're walking, they're of course not knowing that they're being monitored by the Palestinian resistance. The Palestinian resistance shows that it was preparing side bombs. Again, live monitoring. This is extremely significant. And here they're looking to go into a certain location that the Palestinian resistance had already prepared for them. They prepared this ambush for them, and you can see them coming in, and the Palestinian resistance again watching them live by the moment, like what they're doing with the IDF terror forces. Here they're doing with the IDF undercover forces aligned with the Israeli terror forces, and they're going in here, and you'll see what happens just in a few moments in this video. So as you can see, resistance took all of them down one by one in a massive ambush inside of the Rafah area. And that wasn't the only video that the Palestinian resistance published. They also published another video of them having a sniper activity against the Israeli forces in what they are calling the David Stones operations. The Palestinian resistance now introduced a new operation called David Stones in the northern part of Gaza. They had another operation in the south not long ago. And every single day almost, they're publishing new videos of the Palestinian resistance fighters taking down the Israeli genocide forces. That 600 days in, this is in Shuja'iyya area, after again all of the Israel, and despite the fact that Israel is carrying all the weight, all of its soldiers, all of its genocide forces inside of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian resistance is again monitoring them, live recording them. The people who are recording them are over the ground. This is a man-made, by the way, a Palestinian-made sniper called Al-Ghul, or the Ghost, made by the Palestinian resistance. And here you will see them taking down one of the Israeli genocide forces, as you can see in this video. So again, clearly the Palestinian resistance not only fighting up until this moment, but having superiority over the ground and under the ground with the intel, with the information, with the coordination, with the live monitoring, with the relevant equipment, having certain operations at the same time to carry out ambushes, for example, and successfully lure the terror forces inside of the locations that they want to bring them in, and then successfully taking them down everywhere that they find them. These things are extremely significant, and there's a very good reason why you don't see that on mainstream media, so that the people can cover up what's happening inside of the Gaza Strip. Yet all of this is happening on the ground, and all of this is contributing to the fact that Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu would or have already accepted a ceasefire, although it's not a complete ending of the war. But still, if they had this significant progress, for example, against the Palestinian resistance, then they wouldn't stop, would they? They would continue up until they, as they say, get the job done. Now, there are more tensions. This is the second thing that I want to talk to you about. More tensions are happening between Israel and European countries, but especially France lately, with Israel losing the plot. How are they losing the plot? Well, the foreign ministry of Israel is saying this. They're saying that it's a crusade against the Jewish state. What's a crusade against the Jewish state? What the French president is saying. French president claims that a humanitarian blockade and threatens to increase pressure on Israel. And the foreign ministry published in English a very harsh statement against him. The facts do not interest him. There is no humanitarian blockade. This is a blatant lie, Minister Katz said. And he said that the paper recognizing a Palestinian state will be thrown in the trash, because Macron was talking about the recognition of a Palestinian state France and other European countries are talking about recognizing a Palestinian state, more political support and diplomatic support. But the fact of the matter is, Israel is getting annoyed at any sort of a statement even coming from these countries if they criticize them, or if they say that there's a humanitarian catastrophe, or if they say that, for example, there's a genocide going on. And to this level, saying that France is having a crusade against the Jewish state, the eternal victims, ashamed of nothing and always playing the victim card. Typical. Now, on the diplomatic front, some of the Arab states are doing some moves. But before I get to these moves, the tone in Europe is changing, not only from France, but it's also changing from Germany as well. So Germany now, the German foreign minister is saying that we will approve arms shipments to Israel based on assessment of the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Germany is the second biggest supplier of arms to Israel, following the United States, and after Germany comes Italy. If Germany actually halts arms to Israel, that will be something significant for Israel, way more significant than when Canada, for example, halted arms last year. Of course, if the United States would still arm Israel, Israel would still be able to continue. But the fact that Germany has had positions that were abhorrent, they were the most supportive alongside the United States of Israel, despite all of the criticism and horrors, and they have made abhorrent statements, the political leaders of Germany, towards Israel and the genocide in Gaza, with draconian measures being taken internally in Germany against anyone who sympathizes with the Palestinian people. But this shows you again the level of stupidity of the Israelis and how far they went to cause a problem with, well, one of the biggest allies of Israel, Germany. Germany is a country that, well, it's still petrified of the threat of someone calling them, anti-Jewish or whatever it is. They follow all of that garbage. Although they were the ones, the problem started with them anyway, and these problems started with you in Europe as well, and then they exported it to Palestine. All of a sudden, the Palestinians are involved in something that they had no interest in or any involvement in. They threw their garbage problems there, and now they're blaming the Palestinians with all of these problems. But even them, I mean, even Germany, even the German politicians, even the German leaders, that shows you a very massive diplomatic failure for Israel. Some of the Arab countries are trying to give a ring of support, a diplomatic ring of support for the Palestinian Authority, simultaneously with the announcement of the ceasefire, or the expected announcement of the ceasefire as advised by Donald Trump. And these countries are in particular, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, and Turkey. They wanted to go to the West Bank to meet with the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, to increase the prospect of a Palestinian state, to say that, okay, we reached a ceasefire in Gaza, but we need to have a state. We're not just going to be satisfied with just a ceasefire that Benjamin Netanyahu would break again. No, we want to come and we want to show you solidarity. And in the Saudi Arabian case, that would have been a landmark visit. And guess what? Saudi Arabia is a country that Israel has always been talking about, saying that we want to have a deal with them and we want to let them join what's labeled as the Abraham Accords, and we want to have a peace deal with them. But now they're actually blocking them from visiting. Israel will block Saudi-led delegation from visiting the West Bank. Again, another exercise of paranoia You're talking about a paranoid state. They're afraid from visits. And this is a country that they want to have relations with. Saudi Arabia is one of the key Arab states that Israel wants to deal with. Benjamin Netanyahu himself, personally, has been chasing the Saudis for a deal, for a peace treaty, for them to join the Abraham Accords for decades now. Why? Because Israel begs for recognition. Why? Because a thief wants to be legitimized. Some of the Arab states, try to give him the legitimacy on a governmental level. They never really received the popular legitimacy, and they will never have any sort of real normalization. Even if you look at the peace treaty with Egypt and with Jordan too, let alone with Saudi Arabia. Now, you're trying to reach a deal with them. You're trying to have these diplomatic ties with Saudi Arabia. You're asking the Americans, you're constantly asking the Americans to push, to ask, to include Israel in the negotiations. Let them have a peace treaty with us. Let's have a peace treaty with them. And you're banning them from visiting your puppet. I mean, who is the Palestinian president anyway? It's not like you're talking about someone from no, the Palestinian president, everything is coordinated with Israel. The man moves with the approval of Israel. The man condemns the Palestinian resistance. The man, he whitewashed the genocide by blaming all of the genocide on the Palestinian resistance, and he was swearing at them too. Yet, Israel is banning the Saudi delegation and the Jordanian and Egyptian too. It's like you have relations with them. What does it show you? What does it show you? This is very symbolic. It's showing you how paranoid they are. They are petrified. A normal country isn't afraid of criticism, isn't afraid of flags, isn't afraid of people, even to an extent, some people say even dissent, really. Some people say it's necessary for democracy, right? If we want to talk or pretend like there's like democracy or human rights. And now banning all of the visits coming from, non-hostile countries, to say the least. Some of them have peace treaties with them too, to the West Bank to visit the man who you're even enabling. They are petrified. They are petrified and they're scared to the high heavens. That's why they're constantly talking about we will be destroyed and we will be done. And this is an existential war, an existential threat. The Israeli foreign minister saying yesterday that if we have sanctions against us, we will be destroyed. It will be a second Holocaust, state of total paranoia. And that, alongside the projection of power and the abhorrent barbarism, the exaggerated violence, all of that is a show of strength to hide the fear, to hide the weakness, to hide the defeated mentality, to hide a defeated nation, to cover up a huge military failure. Yet, despite all of that, they will never be able to hide the failure and cover it up, especially if even a temporary ceasefire deal now goes ahead. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. As usual, hopefully have different segments for you, for those of you who watch shorter clips. In the meantime, everyone, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your night, day, or evening, depending on where you are. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.